How can you plan for retirement if you have limited savings? We're going to talk about it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Jason Heath, welcome back. You were a guest on episode number 198, which aired June 16th, 2018, so just over 3 years ago. The topic was how to find a credible financial planner. Remember that? I think I actually came out to your office to record that. I was
yes, sir.
Back in the days before we had video. It was a different world back then. There's other things that have changed in the last 3 years, but that's probably the main one. So today I want to talk about how to plan for retirement when you've got limited resources. But before we do that, you are a financial planner. And so my understanding is everybody's a financial planner. The guy at the bank's a financial planner. I go in there and what he's really doing is selling me a mutual fund and I don't have to pay anything because his fees are hidden in the cost of the mutual fund. So I assume that is what you do. You're basically selling people stuff, burying your fees, and screwing us all in the process. Have I accurately described your job description there?
Yeah, more or less, Doug. No, I find that unfortunately that's the common misconception or maybe accurate belief that that's what a financial planner does. Frankly, it's one of the reasons that when somebody asks me what I do for a living at a cocktail party or a barbecue back when those things used to happen pre-pandemic, I always kind of cringe. I hate telling people I'm a financial planner because it's a real conversation stopper. Nobody wants to get sold a mutual fund or an insurance policy. So I'm not very popular at those types of events, unfortunately. But I am a certified financial planner. There's lots of certified financial planners out there. I happen to be a fee-only or advice-only financial planner. So that means that I don't sell any products. I don't sell mutual funds, don't sell insurance. I sell my time. I'm sort of more like a lawyer or an accountant, I suppose, more of I guess what you'd call a professional financial planner. But the big problem for consumers is there's not a lot of distinguishing between what different people do. Everyone's a financial planner. Everyone's a wealth strategist, and consumers are sort of left to try to figure things out on their own.
So when you're at a barbecue and people ask what you do, just say you're a doctor. That's what I do.
Exactly.
I'm a doctor. Yeah. And then they'll show you their thing on their arm and you don't have to tell them what you really do for a living.
That might be worse. I don't know.
It might be. So I come to you and I say, hey, I want to hire you to be my financial planner. And so if I go to the bank, they're going to say, no problem. We'll come up with a financial plan. Here are the bank's mutual funds that you're going to buy, and we're going to get our fee out of that. So when I come to you, you're going to recommend whatever I need then, regardless of how much you get paid. Is that how it works? Or
yeah, kind of. But maybe to clarify a little bit further, a lot of times when people are looking for financial planning advice from a typical financial planner, the solution is to buy a mutual fund or buy an insurance policy because that's what they sell. A lot of clients we work with, it might be someone who says, I'm 35 or I'm 45 or I'm 55 and I'm planning for retirement and I want to know how much I should be saving. Should I be saving in an RRSP and a TFSA? How do I pay less tax? Do I have the right amount of insurance? Sometimes the conversations will go to investments and investment strategy, but we don't recommend specific investments, more investment strategies and asset allocation and stuff that we find more tangible and black and white. So a lot of the financial planning and even retirement advice that a lot of people get really is investment advice. It's not financial planning advice. It's not retirement planning advice. We deal with all the non-product issues, which, I'm biased, but I think are more important.
Well, and we're going to talk about retirement today. So tell me, what is a what did you just say? A non-financial element to this?
Well, I guess the sort of a non-investment element, I suppose, is, just trying to figure out how much to save. There's a lot of people who are sort of working and plugging away and putting money in their RSP, or they're in a pension plan, or they're paying down debt. And some people don't know how much they need to be saving or how much they need to be paying down in debt, what sort of trajectory they're on. And it's funny because it's something you can't exactly do on the back of a napkin, but we've got clients even who are, engineers and build these spreadsheets and try to model out their future income and expenses and retirement. And it's tough to do. I mean, we use commercial financial planning software to try to model out someone's financial future. And, I think it can be really empowering to know what kind of trajectory you're on, whether it's good or bad. And one of the things we're going to talk about today is sometimes there's people that are not on a great trajectory. They're going into retirement. They don't have a lot of money saved up, and it happens. But I think the sooner you get a sense of the trajectory you're on, good or bad, it allows you to make decisions today in preparation for the future.
Well, so let's talk about that then. And I will put the plug in first that I am a big believer in reducing debt if you're leading into retirement or leading into anything else. I assume you are on the same page with me on that one.
I think that reducing debt is a good thing. Increasing investments are a good thing. A net worth statement is assets minus liabilities. So whether you're increasing your assets and saving or decreasing your liabilities and paying down debt, they both increase your net worth. So frankly, debt repayment can be considered an investment. You're avoiding interest, you're increasing your net worth, and ideally, it's great to go into retirement with no debt. There's going to be people who do, and it's how you deal with it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, and if a credit card interest rate is 20%, there aren't very many investments where you can make 20% after tax.
Yeah,
so
I agree. I see it happens a lot with young people where they've got this credit card balance, but they've got a TFSA and they're hodling cryptocurrency, and markets have performed pretty well the last year. And frankly, stock markets have performed pretty well the last 10 or more years, especially US markets. And there may be people who think they can do better investing, but avoiding 18% interest on a credit card is a pretty good guaranteed rate of return, if you ask me.
So what you're recommending is max out my credit cards and put it in cryptocurrency. Am I interpreting correctly what you just said there?
No.
That's not exactly what you said. Okay.
Don't get me in trouble.
Don't get me in trouble. I ask every guest now what their optimum crypto allocation is, but I've never got an answer yet.
Highly leveraged.
Leveraged. There you go. Okay, so let's get to the subject at hand then. We understand what you do. You sell your time. You give advice just like a lawyer, a doctor, a plumber, any other professional would do. So I am thinking about retirement, and let's forget about what age I am, because obviously I'm pretty old. But I mean, you mentioned the 35, 45, 55-year-old person. Okay. I'm 57, so I'm older than anybody you would ever talk to.
Right.
So, but I don't have a lot of resources. So maybe I've finished a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy to clean up all my debt, or maybe I've just not had a lot of money because, I've got kids and I've put them through school and I just haven't been able to save a lot. Sure. So what is the thought process then as to how I should begin planning for retirement, given that I've got limited savings?
Yeah. So before I answer that, Doug, I might throw something out there, which I think is pretty interesting. I came across this working paper a couple of years ago, and they did a study. The name of the working paper is Saving Regret. I've written about it a couple times in various publications. And I found it pretty interesting because what they did is they interviewed retirees between the age of 60 and 80 who did not save enough for retirement. And they asked them, why didn't you save enough? And it wasn't because they just, didn't put enough aside or because they lost money on cryptocurrency, made bad investments, whatever. It wasn't something like that. About 2/3 of them said that there was a negative financial shock that happened in their life. There was one thing, or in some cases, a couple of things that really derailed them. And the primary ones were divorce, unemployment, and poor health. Now, divorce, obviously there's things you can do to be a better spouse and try to stay married. And that's a good strategy to mitigate against that. Unemployment, look, especially with the pandemic, there's businesses and jobs you never would have thought would have been lost that were. There's only so much you can do to prevent against that. Health, you can buy disability insurance and try to protect against the risk of a disability. But the main thing I think is important to understand is oftentimes people going into retirement without enough money, it was something beyond their control, unexpected. It wasn't negligence. And I think that's really important. It's okay to go into retirement with not enough money. And oftentimes, it's not your fault, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that's a critical point, because that's exactly the reason that the vast majority of people come in to see me as well. Something has happened. And the reasons you just listed, marriage breakup, something happened to my income, unemployment, that sort of thing, or a medical condition which forces me not to work, well, your income's going to go down. So if you were a chef at a really good restaurant 2 years ago and the government said you cannot operate, well, guess what? Yeah. Your income's going to go down. It's pretty much that simple. So I agree. There are many external shocks that cause this. And so, let's make that the assumption that, okay, something happened perhaps outside of my control, and here's where I'm at. What do I do about it?
Well, I think that if it's really bad and it could lead to a consumer proposal or bankruptcy, the earlier you speak to somebody like you, just to give a plug for you, totally unsolicited.
I appreciate the plug. Thank you very much.
The earlier, the better. And I know I've had the conversation with people who've been in that position in the past. The sooner you can start to rebuild, I think the better off you can be. And no matter how much money you have, financial planning at its core comes down to income and expenses. If you want to save money, you need to either increase your income or decrease your expenses. Often it's easier to decrease your expenses than it is to increase your income. But there's this phenomenon as well called lifestyle creep, where as your income rises, people tend to spend more money, sometimes all of it. And it's amazing. Some people, doesn't matter how much money they make, they're going to find a way to spend it all. So I think if you can find a way to increase income or ideally decrease expenses, you can boost your savings rate, and then you can start to do other things in order to prepare for retirement. And I think anyone, especially someone who doesn't have a lot of assets or income, should be motivated to learn about savings options like RRSPs and TFSAs. Which one should I be contributing to? How do I pay less tax now and in the future? Investments and investment fees. Investment fees are a really big component, take a really big component of an investment's return, especially these days when interest rates are so low for a conservative investor. And even government pensions. Government pensions, what people will be entitled to in the future. When should you start your government pensions? Because there's not a mandated date upon which you need to start. There's a range of dates. And the more somebody can become educated about these things, the better I think anyone can prepare for retirement. And it's that much more important for someone who's not in as good a financial position.
Well, so you raise the issue of government pensions. So let's start with that. And I don't want you to go into specific numbers because we're recording this in July of 2021, if I've got my years right. And by the time someone watches this, the world may be different. But in Canada, there are the basic retirement pensions are CPP and OAS. Those are the two big ones, right?
Correct.
And so CPP, Canada Pension Plan, is something I have to have paid into. So if I didn't work in Canada, I'm not eligible for CPP. OAS is, how do I get OAS?
So OAS, Old Age Security, is based on years of residency in Canada. So if somebody has lived in Canada for most or all of their adult life, they'll be entitled to Old Age Security pension and the maximum pension. You need to have at least 40 years of residency after the age of 18. So someone who's lived in Canada for most or all of their adult life would get the maximum Old Age Security pension. And right now that pension is around $600 or so per month, goes up every year with inflation, as is the Canada Pension Plan. But as you alluded to, the Canada Pension Plan CPP, or for those who live in Quebec, the Quebec Pension Plan, or the QPP, which is an identical format, is all based on your years of contribution, as well as some other factors that determine how much you're entitled to in the future.
And in rough numbers, what is the maximum CPP I could be getting now?
So right now in 2021, it's about $1,200 per month. It's about $14,500 per year. But the average is only about $700 per month. So I think that's important. In order to receive the maximum CPP or QPP pension, you need to have contributed for at a high level for as many as 39 years during your career. Not everybody, starts work right away. Not everyone, goes without interruption. Some people retire early. So you can get from Service Canada a statement of contributions that will estimate your future CPP. You can request it in order to determine what your future pension might be. And I think it's good for anybody who's, sort of 55 to 65 to try to get a sense of what that pension is going to be and request a statement from Service Canada. Again, especially if it's going to be a big portion of the retirement income and they're of, more modest means.
And Service Canada is not the same as CRA.
No, Service Canada and Canada Revenue Agency are different agencies. So you can contact Service Canada in order to get information about things like CPP, old age security, employment income. If you're unemployed, they administer government programs as opposed to CRA, that's income tax.
And do they have an online portal like CRA does?
Yep, they've got an online portal where you can make a request. You can call in and make a request. There's different ways to get information about those pensions and your future entitlement.
Okay, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes for people on YouTube. You can go to YouTube and find that. So OAS is reduced if my income is high, is that correct?
Yeah, if your income is too high in retirement once you start to receive OAS, too high being over about $80,000 of income, which is pretty high income for a retiree, your old age security gets reduced by 15 cents on the dollar. So once your income is over $80,000 as an old age security recipient, it's almost like a 15% jump in your tax rate. So generally speaking, it's a minority of OAS recipients that need to worry about this OAS clawback. CPP, on the other hand, there's no clawback. You paid into it, you're entitled to it, you get it. Both pensions are taxable. You get T4A slips and you put it on your tax return. So the government gives with one hand and it takes a little back with the other. But both can be pretty significant dollars when you look at the cumulative payments over the course of your lifetime.
Yeah, and that's a key point because I see that all the time. People retire. So let's say they retire in the middle of the year, June, July, August. So they got their paycheck for the first half of the year, and then they start getting CPP and perhaps OAS for the second half of the year. Mm-hmm. And they end up being in a higher tax bracket than they thought. And the first full year of retirement, or the first partial year of retirement, when they do their taxes, like, hey, how can I possibly owe money? Well, because CPP wasn't taking enough taxes off. So that's something you really got to be aware of. What is GIS?
So GIS, Guaranteed Income Supplement, is a pension, or maybe more appropriately a benefit, but it is a pension payment, a monthly payment payable to people over 65 and older who are receiving OAS, old age security. So you need to have applied for OAS, and your income needs to be below $19,000 or so if you're single. And if you are married, it depends on whether your spouse or common law partner would be considered married in this instance, is also receiving old age security, and your income can range from about $25,000 up to $45,000. So GIS, generally speaking, you need an income of under $45,000, and there's other factors that determine whether you're entitled. So it's a monthly payment for low income OAS recipients, and the maximum right now is about $900 per month, and it's tax-free income. So it can be a big deal for low-income recipients of old age security, and it's actually a primary reason that savers need to be careful about having too much or making contributions to an RRSP if they're a low-income individual and expect to have a low income in retirement. Those RRSP contributions upon withdrawal could significantly impact your entitlement to government benefits like GIS and several others.
So this is a key point you're raising here, because the whole point of this is to look ahead to what my retirement years could look like. The maximum I can get on CPP is, let's call it $1,200 a month, rough numbers, but that's only if I was contributing at the maximum rate for 40 years.
Right.
I will likely be eligible for OAS. However, if my income is higher, then it will be a lower number. And if my income is relatively low, then I'm eligible for, let's call it up to $900 a month in GIS. But the higher my income, then the lower I will get in GIS, and potentially the lower I will get in OAS as well. So if I'm retired, my RRSP can be a source of income for me. Or if I get to a certain age, I have to flip it over into a RIF, right?
Yep,
which means it's paying money out every month to me as well, or every year, or however I set it up. And that increases my income, which could therefore reduce what I'm eligible for to get for either GIS or OAS potentially. So it sounds to me then, I should never put money in an RRSP. I should put it either in a TFSA or in crypto. What say you?
I wouldn't say never put money into an RRSP. I think, some people should, some people should not. And the higher someone's income is, the more years they have until retirement. If they have a matching contribution from their employer, they work for a company and they've got a group RRSP where their employer puts money in every time they contribute to an RRSP. I mean, those are reasons to consider an RRSP. If somebody's got a relatively low or sort of a modest income, especially if they're close to retirement, contributing to an RRSP can be detrimental because it can inhibit or reduce entitlement to government benefits like GIS, like OAS. There's also other tax credits, like there's a quarterly GST, HST benefit. Province of Ontario has got a Trillium benefit, an energy and property tax credit, a sales tax credit. There's other tax credits as well for different provinces and territories. So RRSPs can certainly be detrimental to some low income earners and defeat the purpose of, the tax deferral they're meant to assist with.
So under that scenario, if I am X years old and my income is relatively moderate and I don't expect it's going to change between now and retirement, but let's say my situation is such that I can save a couple of $100 a month, you would be recommending would probably be better off putting it in something like a TFSA than in putting it in something like an RRSP.
Absolutely. I think tax-free savings accounts are great accounts for people of all levels of income. Obviously, people with lots of money to dump in their TFSA benefit. People with lower incomes, I think, benefit that much more on a comparable or on a relative basis because it can, again, maximize entitlement to these future benefits, minimize future income. RRSP tax deductions aren't as beneficial. So a low income saver, I think I would lean more towards a tax-free savings account. But at the same time, it kind of depends what other options you have. If you've got debt, particularly if you are a conservative investor, if you can put money in your TFSA and buy a GIC for 1%, or you can pay down your mortgage at 2 or 3, or your unsecured line of credit at 8, or your credit card at 18, I would opt for debt repayment over paying down a TFSA. The sort of mortgage versus TFSA conundrum, I think, is a coin toss for a lot of people. But low risk, low return investors may forgo savings completely and just get rid of that debt in order to prepare for the future.
And the reason for that is any money that comes out of my RRSP is taxable, but any money I take out of my TFSA is not taxable. That's why they call it tax-free.
That's right. So RRSPs, you contribute, you get a tax deduction and a tax refund, but on the back end, when you pull money out, you report it as income, you pay tax. So the higher your tax rate is when you're working and the lower when you're in retirement, the more of a benefit there is. tax-free savings accounts, tax-free all the way. You put money in, it grows tax-free. Withdrawals are tax-free. You don't get the tax deduction up front. That's the big difference.
That's the difference. So what you just described there was a scenario where I got to actually do some thinking and some number crunching, because the answer is not obvious. Like the bank that sells RSPs will always tell you to put your money in RSP because, it grows tax free, but that is not the correct answer for everybody. It might be the correct answer for many people. In fact, it is, but you're right. The answer might be to put it in a TFSA. The answer might be to pay down other debt. There could be other factors. Is that the kind of thought process that someone like you is helpful for? So you gave me the plug, and now I'm turning it back. You get to do your plug here. So under what circumstances should someone listening be talking to a CFP, a certified financial planner?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm biased being a CFP who sells time, but I think there can be a benefit. Not everyone needs a comprehensive financial plan with a CFP. We have clients that we work with every year in, year out. We have clients we work with once and never see again. There are CFPs out there where you can buy an hour of time to get some high-level advice on a specific issue like this. RSP or TFSA, how does my CPP and OAS and GIS work? Most CFPs, as we talked about, sell investments or insurance, but there are fee-only, advice-only CFPs, not very many, maybe 200, if that, in the whole country, who operate on an hourly basis. I like it because I think it makes financial advice accessible to anyone. Hourly rates could range from $200 to $400 an hour. It's like hiring any other professional, like a lawyer or an accountant, though. But does everyone who needs to make decisions about their retirement or investments, for that matter, need to work with a CFP? No way. There's great resources and information out there. And frankly, I think the really good information that I might even direct people to is on Service Canada's website. The information they have about CPP, OAS, and GIS is very good. The Canada Revenue Agency has great information about tax credits and benefits, and even about CPP and old age security as well. But Service Canada's website is very robust when it comes to talking about these sorts of government benefits. I think where the government does falter a little bit is when somebody is 64 and a half, the government sends out an application for CPP and old age security, and the vast majority of people fill it in and send it back like good Canadians that they are, and don't really take the time to question, should I be starting my CPP and my old age security at age 65? You don't need to. You can start CPP as early as 60, as late as 70, and OAS can be between 65 and 70. And there's some compelling reasons to consider an early or a late start to those pensions.
And I guess the obvious reason is the later you start your CPP, the more you're going to get paid once it starts.
Absolutely. So with CPP, if you defer it after the age of 65, it increases by 0.7% per month, call it 8.4% per year for every year that you defer. Plus, in the meantime, every year it goes up with inflation. So it can be a pretty big increase in that pension to the extent that you defer it. But we talked about as well this GIS, guaranteed income supplement, that low-income seniors will be entitled to. If you start your CPP at 60 or at 65, and then you apply for old age security and you're a low-income senior, that CPP pension is going to reduce your access to the GIS because the CPP is taxable income. So there can be advantages to deferring your CPP income as late as age 70 in order to maximize your entitlement to the guaranteed income supplement. You need to apply for OAS at 65 to get the GIS, but for those who can or for whom it's beneficial to defer CPP, I think they should strongly consider it.
So your advice is start with the Service Canada website, to help you crunch the numbers and at least understand how it works. And then if at that point you need to reach out to someone such as yourself, then that would be the next step. Final question for you then. how can I, and because you told us the math, it's either income or expenses. Those are the only two variables you can play with. You either need to increase your income or reduce your expenses. Increasing your income is kind of hard, particularly if you're closing in on retirement.
Side hustles. You can start a podcast or something, right?
Oh yeah, podcasts are really profitable. You can see by all the ads I'm running on this one that it's hugely possible. Although if anyone wants to advertise,
Sponsor?
yeah, absolutely. Give me a call. I haven't had ads for 7 years, but who knows everybody has their price, right? So what is your advice then for someone who wants to make that math that much better? What is your advice for either increasing income or reducing expenses to prepare for retirement as you get closer to it?
Well, there's obvious stuff. I think like cutting costs the old-fashioned way, just the same way anyone else would do if they want to save more or spend less. Eating at home instead of eating out is a surefire way to bring your spending down. It's hard because it's that much easier to, get on your smartphone and have food delivered to you these days. I think when you go shopping, shop with a list. Don't shop hungry. Make sure you stick to your budget. Meal planning. The thing I like the most about cutting costs in that area is we need to eat. Most of us 3 meals a day. It's a constant recurring expense, but there are other recurring expenses like memberships, cable, home phone costs. I think you want to go through your budget and look at what are those things that every month appear in your budget and what can you do to bring those down. Car costs are often the biggest expense that people have in addition to their home. Buying a slightly used car and driving it into the ground is probably the best bang for your buck with car ownership. But these days there's more alternatives to owning a car, or at least for a family to consider or reconsider owning a second car beyond public transit, because there's car sharing, there's ride sharing, there's options that are possibly cheaper than having a car that sits in your parking spot or driveway. Even if you're not driving, you're paying insurance, it's depreciating, there's maintenance that you'll have. So I think those are some of the costs I would look to reduce. In terms of strategy, often I'll encourage people to reduce their spending limit on their credit card through their monthly budget. It's one way to make sure if you're bumping off of that credit limit on your credit card that you're spending too much. So it can limit you. And there's the old-fashioned way of just money in envelopes and really staying committed to how much you've allocated to various expenses. I think something that everyone should be looking at as well, anyone who has investments, there are 3 costs to your investments that are important to watch. One's investment fees. Canada has notoriously high investment fees. Average mutual funds cost around 2%. That's the embedded fee in the mutual fund, but some are as high as 3%. There's lower cost alternatives in the 0.5% to 1% range, or even less. I think the second cost on investments and just on income generally is tax. Using tools like RRSPs and TFSAs can reduce tax or defer tax. And the third cost, I think, to really watch in terms of investments is inflation. Right now, inflation has been relatively low, but has jumped up a little bit the last number of months as the economy is starting to reopen. But inflation pushes up the cost of living, diminishes the purchasing power of your investments. Right now, the Canadian 10-year government bonds paying about 1.25%. If you're paying 2% on your mutual funds, and they're conservative mutual funds invested in bonds, and you're not even earning a 2% rate of return, you're falling behind. So I think to the extent that people can get educated about their investments and investing and fees and all those things are really important in order to keep your costs down, including your cost of investing.
Excellent. Well, that's some fantastic practical advice. And those are things that we sort of kind of know about, but probably don't think about consciously. And if we do, that can free up a few extra bucks, which can go back into the pot, which can then be there for when we're ready to retire. So Jason Heath, that was some fantastic advice today. How can people find you, troll you, track you down? What's the best way to find you?
So my company is Objective Financial Partners. So you can check us out on objectivefinancialpartners.com. jason.heath.com. I'm on Twitter at Jason Heath CFP, as in Certified Financial Planner. I write for the Financial Post, for Money Sense and Canadian Money Saver. Contribute a lot to the Toronto Star these days as well. So always out there trying to give good practical advice, as are you, to consumers and Canadians that can benefit. So I appreciate everything you're doing, and feel like we're on the same team trying to provide advice for people.
Yeah, I agree, because this stuff is complicated, and retirement is something you probably only do once in your life. It's not something you do every 5 years. So It's not something we're experts in until we get there. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to get the word out. I will put links to everything you just mentioned in the show notes on YouTube so that people can find you. Jason, thanks very much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That was Jason Heath. And as I said, I will put links on YouTube in the show notes so that you can track them down. And that is our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.